The night has not yet ended. Somewhere along the edge of the city of Thebes, where the narrow mud brick alleys sleep in silence, a small house breathes into the darkness. A house not marked by grand pillars or lavish gates, but by the faintest, lingering scent of lotus oil and crushed myrrh, clinging to the soft fabric of the curtains that stir gently in the breeze. Inside, before the first recalls, the women are already stirring down. It is not a brothel, as one might imagine in later centuries, with loud laughter spilling into the streets or gaudy signs announcing its purpose. Here it is called a house of perfumes, a quiet, dignified name, because, in truth, it is a house of many things: beauty, skill, conversation, music, and sometimes pleasure. The walls are cool in the early hours. The clay floors still hold the night's chill, and the lamps are no longer burning. Only the soft blue-gray of pre-dawn light trickles through the reed shutters, casting delicate patterns upon the sleeping mats. A woman, perhaps 20, stirs first, but her name is lost to us now. History has not remembered the names of women like her. But still, she rises, slowly, the linen of her sleeping tunic rustling gently as she lifts herself onto her knees. She does not rush. There is no hurry in this hour dot by her side. An older woman hums softly under her breath, a tune that is older than both of them, a melody once sung to the goddess Hathor, patroness of music, joy, and the quiet power of femininity. They move through the dim space with practiced ease, their footsteps soft upon woven mats. Near the eastern wall sits a small low table, more of a shelf, lined with jars of unguents and oils, their alabaster and clay surfaces cool to the touch. The younger woman reaches for a tiny pot of kifi, a sacred mixture of honey, raisins, wine, and fragrant herbs prepared the day before. She opens the lid gently, releasing a warm, resinous scent that fills the room like a soft exhale. This is not yet for clients. This is for themselves. A ritual of awakening dot nearby. A shallow bronze basin sits waiting, water glistening inside. Like a quiet mirror, the women take turns washing their faces, cupping the water in their hands and letting it run slowly down their cheeks, as if washing away the remnants of sleep. The rhythm is slow, deliberate. They do not speak much in these early hours. Words are not needed. The house itself seems to breathe with them, as it always has, a shared rhythm of hands moving over skin, of breath softly releasing, of cloth brushing gently as tunics are adjusted. A coal stick is warmed between the fingers. There is no mirror here. Reflection is not a matter of glass, but of touch and memory. The younger woman takes the small, pointed stick and draws it carefully along the edge of her eyelids, the malachite pigment cool against her skin. She has done this many times, and yet each stroke is a small act of art. The green lines will catch the morning light when she steps outside, though that is still an hour away. Nearby, another woman sits on a low stool, carefully untangling a string of beads. They will be woven into her hair soon, one by one. Her fingers move deftly, but without haste. Time moves differently in a house like this, not by the sun's position, but by the slow rituals of adornment and readiness. From a corner alcove, the faintest glow appears. A lamp is lit, its flame flickering within a small terracotta dish. It is not bright. It is not meant to be. Just enough to see the pale shimmer of oil as it's poured into small cupped hands, rubbed slowly into arms, shoulders, the nape of the neck. Lotus, frankincense, cinnamon. The scents are layered carefully, like whispers upon the skin. Outside, the city is still wrapped in its last dreams. The merchants have not yet set up their stalls, and the Nile flows in hushed murmurs, carrying with it the secrets of the night. But within this small house, life has already begun. Not loudly, not hurriedly, but with a patience that comes from knowing how to prepare the self. For the day ahead, these women are not rushing to seduce or to sell. Their work is not a frantic scramble for attention. It is rather a slow, deliberate unveiling. A performance of self rehearsed not in grand gestures, but in the quiet care of each moment, the smoothing of linen over the hips, the selection of a single flower to place in the hair, the delicate threading of a gold earring. One might imagine their world is filled with noise. But here, it is stillness that reigns. The house is small, but it is alive. Alive with the rustle of papyrus scrolls stacked near a sleeping mat. Alive with the soft chime of ankle bracelets as a woman shifts her posture. Alive with the unspoken communion between women who share not just a space, but a craft, the art of beauty, the art of companionship, the art of navigating a world that often prefers to look away. As dawn's first golden threads weave through the shutters, the house feels as though it inhales. Soon, the city will wake. Soon, the clients will come. Merchants looking for distraction, scribes seeking a muse, travelers eager for stories and song. But for now, it is still early. There is one last task before the day begins. A small altar sits in the corner, dedicated to Hathor, Lady of the Sycamore, Mistress of the Sistrum. A small offering is placed. A fig, a piece of bread, a few drops of sweet wine. Not as a plea, but as a conversation. A quiet reminder that beauty is a sacred act, that joy is not a sin, and that in these small rituals, these women are not merely preparing for work. They are weaving themselves into the fabric of the world. The sun has not yet risen, but they are ready. And so the house breathes again, calm, measured, unhurried. Soon, the city will awaken, but for now, we rest with them in this stillness. The city has barely begun to stir. Outside, the light of dawn stretches slowly across the mud brick walls of Thebes. Yet within the small house of perfumes, the women are already immersed in a quiet practice ritual, the slow, deliberate transformation of themselves into living works of art. There is no rush, no flurry of activity, just a patient, flowing rhythm as natural as the river Nile itself. One woman, seated upon a low reed mat, leans over a stone pallet. Her fingers, delicate yet firm, grasp a small pestle carved from alabaster. With careful circular motions, she grinds a piece of malachite green as the fertile banks of the river into a fine, shimmering powder. The motion is repetitive, soothing. It is a task she has done hundreds of times, yet it is never careless. The consistency of the powder must be just right. Not too coarse, not too fine. Only then will it glide smoothly onto the curve of an eyelid, casting the perfect green glow beneath the lashes. Nearby, another woman untangles strands of hair with a carved bone comb, her movements unhurried, as though combing through the very air. The soft sound of the comb catching gently in hair fills the space, a faint whisper in the quiet morning. Her hair, dark and thick, will soon be adorned with tiny beads, delicate cylinders of faience, gleaming in shades of turquoise and deep blue. She has already selected them, laying them out in a neat line upon a linen cloth, each bead a small choice in how she will present herself today. These are not acts of vanity. They are acts of skill, of craft. In a world where appearance is language, every gesture, every braid, every line of kohl, every gleaming bead is a sentence, a phrase spoken without words. To the untrained eye, it may seem like mere decoration, but to these women, it is the foundation of their work. The preparation of the skin is a ritual in itself. A small jar is opened, releasing the thick, sweet fragrance of lotus oil, blended with hints of cinnamon and honey. With open palms, they smooth the oil over their arms, shoulders, and collarbones, massaging it into the skin with deliberate strokes. The oil softens the skin against the harshness of the sun, but it does more than that. It creates a subtle glow, a radiance that catches the eye, even the softest of candlelight. The act of anointing is slow, reverent. Fingers glide over the curve of a shoulder, over the hollow of a throat, not hurried, but savoring the texture, the way the skin warms beneath their touch. They speak little during this time. The room is filled instead with the quiet sounds of breath, the faint clink of glass jars being set down, and the occasional soft murmur when a woman leans in to help fasten a necklace or adjust the fall of a linen wrap. The linen garments themselves are simple in form, long, flowing, sleeveless, but their simplicity is deceptive. The art lies in how they are worn. A belt tied so creating a curve at the waist, a fold adjusted to reveal or conceal the subtle line of a hip. These choices are not dictated by vanity, but by intent. Each woman knows the message she wishes to convey today, and her garment will speak for her before she utters a single word. Some days the look is playful, a flower tucked behind the ear, a cascade of beads braided into the hair, bracelets that jingle softly with every gesture. Other days it is more understated, a single strand of gold at the wrist. A faint dusting of crushed rose petals mixed with oil, enough to create a lingering trace of scent in the air when she moves. In a quiet alcove of the room, a woman sits with a small reed stylus in hand, dipping it gently into a pot of dark coal. She leans towards a polished copper mirror, not perfect, but polished enough to catch the shapes of her reflection. With a steady hand, she draws the familiar line from the inner corner of her eye outward, elongating the shape in a way that echoes the gods themselves. The line is not merely aesthetic, it is protective. The coal shields her eyes from the harsh glare of the sun and wards off infection. Beauty, in this world, is never divorced from function. The murmur of conversation begins to swell softly, a quiet undercurrent as the women share small snippets of news. A familiar client returned from a journey to the Delta, a merchant's son, newly come of age and eager to prove his charm. These stories are exchanged not with excitement or gossiping tones, but with the calm awareness of women who understand. There's subtle games of human interaction. Information is a currency here, passed quietly, without urgency, as casually as the exchange of a bracelet or a borrowed hairpin, and always the hands are moving, plaiting, smoothing, adjusting. A woman leans over to help fasten the back of another's necklace, her fingers brushing gently against warm skin. Another deftly weaves a string of beads into her companion's braid, her motions rhythmic as though weaving a spell. Outside, the sounds of the city begin to emerge, faint and distant. The scrape of wooden shutters being open, the low bray of a donkey pulling a cart of fresh rushes. But inside, time moves more slowly. The preparations are not yet done. A small ceramic bowl holds a paste of ochre and fat, mixed earlier with a pinch of ground carnelian. With her fingertip, one woman dabs it gently onto her lips, tinting them with a soft, burnished red. The effect is subtle, yet deliberate. It is not meant to startle. It is meant to invite a second glance, a lingering gaze dot in another corner. Perfume cones are prepared, small, waxy mounds infused with myrrh, placed gently atop braided hair. As the heat of the day builds, the cones will melt slowly, releasing their scent in a controlled, measured way. By midday, their fragrance will be at its strongest, enveloping the wearer in a subtle, aromatic halo. The act of preparing oneself is not merely about appearance. It is a quiet armor. A daily act of self-creation in a world that watches, judges, assumes. These women are not naive to the glances they will attract, nor are they oblivious to the assumptions that will follow. But they have learned to navigate these currents with grace, crafting an image that allows them to move through public spaces with a blend of allure and dignity. One of the older women, perhaps in her late 30s, sits with a younger apprentice. At her feet, teaching her the delicate art of weaving gold thread into linen sashes. Her voice is soft, measured, as she explains how the glint of metal catches the light differently at sunset than it does at dawn, and how a subtle shimmer at the waist can draw attention far more effectively than a necklace at the throat. These are lessons not taught in temples or Scrabble schools. These are lessons passed from woman to woman, from experience to eager hands. The morning preparations continue until, at last, the light filtering through the shutters shifts, becoming warmer, richer, a soft amber that signals the rising of the sun. It is nearly time, but before stepping out into the awakening city, there is a final pause. A moment of stillness. The women gather briefly, their reflections flickering in the polished bronze and copper surfaces around them. They check one another's hair, adjust the fold of a sash, smooth a crease in a sleeve. These gestures are small, almost tender. It is a shared ritual of readiness, of silent encouragement. Today, like every day, they will walk into the city not as nameless shadows, but as living embodiments of a craft that blends beauty, wit, and a deep understanding of human desire. Their work is not loud, nor is it crude. It is a practice honed over countless mornings like this one, in rooms filled with the soft clink of beads and the lingering scent of lotus dot as they step outside. Into the growing hum of the streets, the air carries with it the fragrance of their preparations. A subtle perfume trail that blends into the fabric of the marketplace. Their day has only just begun, but their true work, the quiet mastery of appearance, of presence, has already been in motion since before the first light touched the city walls dot by now. The city of Thebes is fully awake. The narrow streets are filling with life, though it is not a life of grand gestures or loud declarations. Rather, it is the quiet bustle of daily routines. Vendors setting out baskets of figs and dates. Craftsmen arranging their goods beneath woven awnings. And the rivermen calling to one another as they guide their reed boats along the shimmering surface of the Nile among them. The women from the House of Perfume step into this moving tapestry with a grace that seems almost effortless. They do not rush. There is no need to. Their presence is not announced with fanfare, but with subtler invitations, a certain softness to the way they walk. The measured sway of hips wrapped in finely folded linen, the glint of sunlight catching on beaded braids. That dance gently with every step. The marketplaces are alive with sound, yet within this noise, there are quieter conversations, smaller, more personal exchanges, hidden beneath the surface. These are the spaces in which these women move most naturally. They are not here merely to sell themselves, as outsiders might crudely imagine. The transaction is far more layered, far more intricate than that. Here, in the labyrinth of market stalls, their work begins not with propositions, but with presence. A lingering glance over a tray of pomegranate seeds. A soft smile offered to a passing merchant. An extended moment of eye contact as they examine a strand of faience beads hanging from a vendor's stall. Every gesture is calculated, yet it never feels forced. The art of being seen, yet not appearing to seek attention, is a skill that takes years to master. These women have learned how to let a glance linger just long enough to suggest interest, without appearing eager. A tilt of the head, the careful adjustment of a sash, the subtle play of fingers brushing against a trinket, these are their tools, more potent than words. They understand that in a place like this, attention is a valuable currency, but it must be spent wisely. The market itself is a place of constant exchange, but not all exchanges are for silver or copper. Often, it is favors, stories, introductions that hold more value. A conversation with a perfume seller might lead to a whispered tip about a visiting nobleman seeking companionship. A brief, shared laugh with a scribe's apprentice could open doors to more influential circles. These small interactions form a network, an invisible web of connections spun delicately throughout the city. The women walk in pairs or small groups, never in isolation. There is strength in numbers, but also a kind of choreography that emerges when they move together. A harmony of footsteps and soft conversation that turns heads without needing to demand them. Their voices are low, their laughter soft, designed to draw in rather than to push out. They browse the stalls with genuine interest. For beauty in their world is not only worn, it is cultivated through constant inspiration. A fragment of embroidered linen might spark a new way to fold a tunic. A shard of glazed pottery, shimmering in the sun, might suggest a new pattern for beadwork. Their eyes are always learning, always collecting, but beneath these casual meanderings, there is a silent negotiation constantly in play. When a merchant's son, barely into manhood, stammers over his words while offering them a price, they respond with a kindness that encourages him while gently steering the conversation. When a seasoned trader, more confident in his wit, attempts a bolder remark, they parry with elegance, offering him a reason to linger, to walk alongside them, perhaps to offer a cooling drink in the shade of his family's shop. Not all encounters will lead to patronage. That is understood. But every interaction is a seed planted. Sometimes it will bloom later, when the young merchant finds himself in need of a companion for a festival evening, or when a scribe recalls their gentle conversation and recommends them to a visiting dignitary. Patience is as much a part of their craft as perfume and jewelry. The city's central square is where the air feels thick with possibility. The sun is higher now, warming the stone beneath their feet, and the mingling scents of bread baking, fresh cut flowers, and simmering herbs create a heady mixture that clings to the senses. Here, the women take a brief respite beneath the canopy of woven palm fronds, their bodies relaxing into soft cushions as a street musician plucks at a small harp nearby. They are visible, but not ostentatious. Their placement here is deliberate, at a crossroad where merchants, scribes, and travelers pass through on their way to more hurried affairs. It is in these resting moments that the most valuable exchanges occur. A passing artisan, his tunic dusted with flecks of stone from a nearby workshop, pauses to offer them a carved amulet, not as a gift, but as a token of interest. They examine it with polite curiosity, their fingers brushing gently over its surface, their eyes lifting just enough to meet his gaze. A conversation begins. It is light, playful, and yet within it, there are unspoken invitations, subtle inquiries about his patrons, his work, his evening plans. Such conversations are not transactional in the blunt sense. There is no direct offer, no overt proposition. Instead, there is a shared understanding of the dance being performed, a delicate balance of mutual intrigue, of suggesting without declaring, of allowing the possibility of further meeting without the weight of obligation. They are careful, too, in reading the room. Not every man is a potential client, and not every woman is a competitor. Some are allies, other courtesans, dancers, musicians, each navigating her own path through the marketplace's social maze. A nod here, a whispered greeting there. They maintain these connections as diligently as they maintain their appearance, knowing that today's shared information may become tomorrow's vital introduction. As midday approaches, the heat presses down more insistently, and the rhythm of the market begins to slow. Vendors retreat beneath their awnings, fanning themselves with woven palm leaves. The women of the House of Perfumes, too, know it is time to withdraw for a while, but not before one last circuit through the quieter alleys, where they know the more discerning clients tend to wander, those who avoid the clamor of the main square, preferring instead a more private, considered encounter. It is in these shaded passages lined with small, discreet shops, sellers of papyrus scrolls, incense makers, fine jewelers, that a different kind of exchange occurs. Here, gestures are even subtler, and words are chosen with meticulous care. A compliment offered on a well-crafted bracelet might lead to an invitation for a cup of honeyed beer. A shared appreciation for a rare scent might unfold into a conversation. About an upcoming temple festival. The goal is not immediate. These women are not hawking their services like market goods. Their work is in building intrigue, in planting a lingering curiosity that will lead a man to seek them out later, on his own terms, believing it was his idea all along. By the time they retreat from the marketplace, the seeds of many such encounters have been sown. Some will blossom tonight, others in days to come. This is the quiet labor of their profession, unseen by most, yet carefully cultivated with each step, each glance, each carefully chosen word. As they make their way back towards the rivers edge, where the shade is thickest and the air carries a cooling breeze, they carry with them not just the dust of the city on their sandals, but the subtle triumph of a morning well spent. They have woven themselves into the fabric of the city's commerce, not with loud proclamations, but with the soft, persistent threads of presence and poise. The marketplaces will soon quiet for the afternoon, but their work is far from over. For in the houses of pleasure, preparations for the evening will soon begin again, and the women, having walked the delicate line between visibility and mystery, will return to their home, carrying with them the quiet promises of the encounters they have curated. The sun is at its peak now, and the city of Thebes seems to pause beneath its heat dot in the narrow side streets. The air shimmers with warmth, curling around the clay walls, and drifting lazily through woven shutters. It is during this time of midday stillness that the women of the House of Perfumes return home, their movements unhurried, their faces composed. They have spent the morning moving through the market's dance of gestures and glances. But now they step into a different world, a quieter, more intimate space known to some as a house of pleasure, though to them it is simply their house. From the outside, there is nothing particularly grand about the building. It is a modest structure, its walls the soft ochre of sun-baked clay, its windows small and discreet. There's no sign hanging above the door, no loud proclamations of the services offered within. This is not a place that needs to shout. Those who seek it out already know its worth. Inside, however, the air changes. The sunlight softens as it filters through linen curtains, casting long, diffused beams across reed mats and smooth, cool floors. The house is alive yet quiet, a sanctuary of murmurs, soft footsteps, and the faint lingering aroma of incense that has soaked into the very walls over years of ritual and presence. Along the edges of the main room, cushions are arranged in low, inviting circles. They're woven, patterns faded from countless hours of conversation and laughter. Small, hand-carved stools hold trays of fig cakes, bowls of pomegranates, and pitchers of sweet date wine. Everything within the space is designed to offer ease, but not luxury. This is not a palace. It is a house of craft, a house of women, who understand the art of presence dot at the far end of the room. A small altar sits beneath a niche in the wall. Here, offerings of fresh flowers and flickering oil lamps are arranged before small clay figurines, goddesses of love, fertility, and music. Hathor's face, with her soft smile and delicate cow horns, gazes out across the room, watching over the rituals of beauty and connection that unfold daily beneath her gaze. This blending of the sacred and the sensual is not an affectation. It is a truth deeply woven into the lives of these women. To them, pleasure is not something base or profane. It is an offering, a craft that holds space between the divine and the human dot. The midday hours within the house are not idle. They are a time of preparation dot in a side chamber. A woman kneels beside a basin, gently washing the dust of the marketplace. From her arms, her collarbone, her feet, another sits with a jar of honeyed oil, massaging it into her forearms, her movements slow and methodical. The room hums with small personal tasks, combing, anointing, arranging jewelry. These are not rushed acts. There is no clock here, only the rhythm of bodies moving through familiar routines. Yet, beneath the surface, there is a quiet readiness. Later, as the sun begins to lower, clients will arrive. Some will come seeking companionship, a conversation, a song, a quiet hour away from the noise of the city. Others will come seeking more intimate exchanges. But here, there is no assumption, no presumption. Every meeting begins not with expectation, but with a ritual of welcome dot in the main hall. Low tables are wiped clean, fresh linen is laid over cushions, and small clay cups are arranged for wine. There is a particular grace in these movements, a choreography of hands and feet that brings the house to life without fanfare. The clink of ceramic, the soft sweep of a reed broom across the floor, the faint rustle of linen as the women move, these are the sounds that fill the house in. These hours, when a client arrives, the house does not greet him with loud music or lavish feasts. Instead, the welcome is personal, measured. A woman, sometimes two, will meet him at the threshold, offering a cool cloth to wipe his face, a small cup of water perfumed with a hint of mint. The exchange of greetings is slow, unhurried. Names are spoken softly. Eyes meet, and there is no rush to move forward. The client is led into the main room, where the air is cooler, where shadows lengthen gracefully across the floor. Here, He is not immediately propositioned. Instead, he is invited to sit, to drink, to listen. A lute, maybe plucked gently in the corner. A soft-voiced woman may begin a quiet song, a melody about rivers and moonlight, about distant lovers separated by the flow of time. It is in this atmosphere of ease that conversation unfolds. The women are not simply providers of physical pleasure. They are listeners, storytellers, companions who understand that intimacy is built as much through words and shared silences as through touch. A merchant might speak of his journeys, of strange spices in far-off lands. A scribe may share a newly composed poem, eager for an attentive ear. These exchanges are never forced. They evolve naturally. Like the slow bloom of a lotus opening to the morning sun, there's a particular etiquette here, understood without being spoken. Clients are expected to be respectful, to engage with gentleness. The house maintains its own subtle rules, and those who fail to observe them find themselves gently, but firmly, unwelcome. The women do not need to raise their voices to assert this boundary. Their composure, their ease, is authority enough. Some rooms within the house are more private, reserved for those moments when a client and a companion choose to share more personal time. These chambers are simple: a woven mat, a low bed, small trays holding jars of scented oil, clean cloths folded neatly. There is no excess, no opulence, but everything is prepared with care. Here, pleasure is not a hurried transaction. It is an exchange crafted with attentiveness, with mutual awareness. The women understand how to read a person's posture, how to listen not only to words but to silences. They guide gently, adjusting their approach with each unique encounter. For them, this is not mechanical work. It is a subtle performance, a dance of presence and sensitivity that requires far more than physical skill. Evenings in the house unfold with a rhythm as natural as the Nile's flow. Some clients will linger longer, enjoying wine and conversation. Others will come and go quietly, leaving behind a silver coin, a small token, or sometimes nothing but a whispered promise to return. The women do not measure their success by the fullness of a purse alone. For them, a successful evening is one in which the house breathes smoothly, where the spaces between encounters feel as soft and balanced as the moments within them. The act of working in a house of pleasure is rarely what outsiders imagine. It is not a parade of seduction or a theater of constant allure. It is a quieter craft, a mastery of pacing, of atmosphere, of knowing when to speak and when to let silence do its work. These women, often misunderstood by the world beyond these walls, have cultivated a deep understanding of human longing and all its subtleties. As the evening deepens, the house glows softly. Lamps are lit with careful hands, casting amber light that pools gently across the rooms. The clink of cups becomes softer, the music more languid. Outside, the sounds of the city fade into the distance, leaving the house cocooned in its own quiet rhythm. There are no sharp endings to the evening, no final calls, no abrupt closings. As clients depart, the house begins to fold itself into rest as naturally as a lotus closes at dusk. The women clean away the day's traces with practiced ease, wiping down surfaces, folding linens, refreshing the small altars with new flowers, preparing the space to welcome the next day's rhythm. But even as they work, there's no sense of urgency. The house has breathed through another day, and its heartbeat slows now in anticipation of night. For the women, this is not an ending, but a pause. A soft inhalation before the next movement begins. Their craft of beauty, of presence, of quiet. Companionship is not a performance put on and taken off. It is woven into every moment, every breath, every small gesture. Even in stillness, they remain in quiet mastery of their art. As the sun sets and the coolness of evening brushes gently over Thebes. There's a different kind of stirring within the city walls. The ordinary rhythms of daily life begin to soften, giving way to something more ceremonial, more ancient. It is on these nights, when the moon hangs like a polished pearl above the Nile, that the temple festivals begin. And for the women of the houses of pleasure, these festivals are not simply celebrations to observe from a distance. They are invitations, sacred and sensual, to step into a space where their craft is not only welcomed, but revered. In the golden age of Egypt, the lines between the sacred and the sensual were far more blurred than they would come to be in later times. Pleasure was not a thing to be hidden in shadowed corners. It was a force recognized by priests, artisans, and kings alike, a gift from the gods, meant to be honored with care and grace within the temples of Hathor, goddess of music, dance, fertility, and joy. The act of sensual performance was seen not as profane, but as a sacred ritual. The courtyards of her temples would often fill with the soft chiming of sistrums, small, handheld instruments that filled the air with a delicate, shimmering rhythm. Women, draped in fine linen and adorned with intricate beadwork, would move in slow, deliberate patterns, their feet bare against the warm stone, their hands raised in gestures of offering. These women were not always priestesses in the formal sense. Some were dancers, others were musicians, and many were courtesans whose skill in the art of movement and presence was sought after for these sacred celebrations. They were invited not because of their status, but because of their mastery in embodying beauty, grace, and the life-giving energy that Hathor herself represented. On festival days, the air was thick with the scent of blue lotus and frankincense. The temple grounds, usually serene and cloistered, would become a living tapestry of color and sound. Banners of dyed linen fluttered in the breeze. Musicians tuned their reed flutes, and acolytes moved through the crowds offering cups of sweetened beer, laced with aromatic herbs, for the courtesans. Preparing for such a day was its own sacred ritual. In the early hours of morning, they would gather in quiet chambers, washing their bodies with water perfumed by crushed lotus petals, anointing their skin with layers of rich, fragrant oils. Their hair was styled with precision, small, beads and golden amulets woven into braids that would shimmer beneath the temple's sunlight. Kohl was applied not merely for beauty, but as a form of protection, its dark lines believed to shield the eyes from both the harshness of the sun and the weight of malevolent spirits. When they entered the temple, it was with a presence that was both grounded and ethereal. They did not rush. Their steps were measured, in rhythm with the soft beat of drums that echoed through the courtyards. They were not merely women arriving for a performance. They were embodiments of the goddess herself, living offerings of music, movement, and grace. As the festival unfolded, the boundaries between observer and participant would begin to dissolve. The women would dance, their movements a flowing language that needed no translation. Hands would trace the air in gestures of fertility and blessing. Hips would sway in patterns that mimicked the rhythms of the river's current, the endless ebb and flow of life. The sistrums chimed in their hands, their soft metallic voices weaving through the chants of priests and the melodic hum of flutes. It was a soundscape designed not to overwhelm, but to envelop, a cocoon of vibration and scent, where the senses were gently guided into a space of reverence and joy. In these moments, the work of a courtesan was transformed. It was no longer a private exchange hidden behind closed doors, but a public sacred act of celebration. The beauty they cultivated daily through their rituals of adornment, their mastery of conversation and presence became an offering to divine, and yet, even within this sacred setting, there remained a quiet undercurrent of personal exchange. The festivals were opportunities not only for worship, but for connection. Merchants, scribes, and nobles attended not merely out of piety, but to be seen, to mingle, to observe the dancers with admiration and, at times, quiet longing. The women moving among the crowds during quieter moments of the day would offer not invitations, but moments of presence. A glance shared over a cup of honeyed beer, a soft exchange about the beauty of a necklace or the quality of a musician's performance. These were not transactions. They were seeds carefully planted in the fertile ground of celebration and song. As dusk approached, the mood of the festival would deepen. The music slowed, its rhythms becoming more fluid, more dreamlike. The air, still warm from the day's sun, carried the mingling scents of incense, wine, and perfumed skin. Torches were lit along the colonnades, their flames flickering like soft heartbeats against the stone walls dot in this golden light. The performances became even more intimate. The courtesans, now glowing beneath layers of scented oil and fine linen, would guide small groups into quieter temple courtyards, spaces designed for storytelling, for song, for shared silences beneath the open sky. Here, the sensuality of their craft was not hidden but elevated, a bridge. Between human longing and divine joy, they would sing songs passed down through generations of women, songs that spoke of love found and lost, of the sweetness and sorrow woven into every life. Their voices, soft and melodic, did not demand attention but offered it gently, inviting listeners into a space where the ordinary worries of daily life could be set aside. If only for a while, it is important to understand that for these women, participation in temple festivals was not a side aspect of their work. It was a core part of their identity, a reaffirmation that their craft was a sacred art. In the houses of pleasure, they worked to ease individual loneliness, to offer companionship and beauty in quiet, personal settings. But in the temples, they became part of something larger, a shared cultural understanding that pleasure, beauty, and the sacred were not opposing forces, but reflections of the same divine energy as night deepened, and the festival slowly unraveled. Into a soft, lingering quiet, the courtesans would return to their homes, walking through streets now hushed beneath the stars. Their bodies, though tired from hours of dance and conversation, carried a calm fulfillment. They had not simply entertained. They had honored their craft, their history, and the goddess who watched over them, back within the familiar walls of the House of Perfumes. They would cleanse themselves again, not out of obligation, but as a soothing ritual of transition. The oils and dust of the temple would be washed away, replaced with cool water and fresh linen. Lamps would be lit low, their golden glow softening the edges of the room. They would sit together, sharing quiet reflections, perhaps passing a jar of sweetened dates or a small clay cup of wine. There was no need to speak much. The bond formed through shared performance, through the collective breath of song and dance beneath Hathor's gaze, was enough. In these quiet hours after the festival, as the city of Thebes slept, their work remained unspoken, yet deeply felt, for theirs was a craft that existed between worlds, in the shadowed alcoves of brothels, in the sunlit courtyards of temples, in the murmured conversations of marketplaces, a delicate, ever-present reminder that beauty and intimacy were not fleeting amusements, but enduring sacred threads woven through the fabric of life itself, the city of Thebes, so often alive with the hum of voices and the clatter of trade, slows beneath the heavy hand of midday. The sun, high and unyielding, pours itself over the stone and clay, warming the city's bones until even the most restless feet pause. It is in these hours, when the shadows shrink and the air feels thick with quiet, that the women of the houses of pleasure find their moment of respite, leaving behind the soft glow of their homes. They step out into the winding alleyways, linen, cloaks draped loosely to shield their skin from the sun. Their feet move with familiarity, tracing a path worn smooth by daily rituals, away from the crowded markets, beyond the dusty streets, and toward the open embrace of the Nile. The river waits, as it always does, eternal, patient, flowing in rhythms far older than any city or temple. Its banks, edged with reeds and shaded by the wide, fanning arms of date palms, offer a cool sanctuary where the world softens. Here, in this narrow space between land and water, the courtesans find a kind of peace that cannot be purchased in. Coin or whispered promises dot as they settle into the dappled shade. Their movements become slower, more fluid. Linen veils are loosened, jewelry unfastened, until their bodies can breathe freely beneath the soft rustle of palm fronds. The air, though warm, carries with it a subtle freshness from the river, a gentle sigh that cools sun-warmed skin. One by one, they approach the water's edge, kneeling to wash away the morning's dust and effort. Clay pots are dipped into the river, filled and poured in quiet, rhythmic motions over arms, necks, ankles. The act is not hurried. There's no need. In these moments, time itself seems to bend and soften, stretching out in a slow, unbroken line. Women share the riverbank with others, washerwomen scrubbing linens against flat stones, fishermen tending to their nets, small children splashing in the shallows. Yet there is a respectful distance maintained. Each person knows that the midday hours by the Nile are a time for gentle reflection. A truce in the day's labor where no one intrudes too closely as their bodies are cleansed. So too are their minds allowed to drift. Conversations, if they happen at all, are soft, murmured exchanges, fragments of stories, quiet laughter, shared observations about the shape of a cloud or the sweetness of a date. There's no need for grand declarations here. The river listens without judgment, carrying away their words as easily as it carries away the dust from their skin. When the washing is done, the women spread woven mats beneath the palms, laying out small bundles of food brought from home. Simple meals, figs split open to reveal their ruby centers, flatbreads still soft from the morning's baking, small clay jars of lentil paste, spiced with cumin and coriander. These are shared without ceremony, passed from hand to hand as naturally as breath, eating beneath the sheltering trees. With the river's slow murmur nearby is a ritual in itself. It is not merely about sustenance. It is about grounding, a chance to feel the earth beneath one's body, to taste food without the layered performances of flirtation or business, to exist in the quiet company of others who understand the weight and rhythm of the same life. Some of the women will close their eyes after eating, drifting into light sleep, lulled by the song of cicadas and the soft pulse of the river. Others will sit upright, combing through their hair with carved wooden picks, weaving in small beads or fresh sprigs of papyrus to replace the ones dulled by morning's labor. It is a time for gentle care, for tending to the small details of the body that are often overlooked amidst the duties of performance and work. Occasionally, an elder woman, perhaps a retired courtesan, now a keeper of stories, will begin to speak, her voice a soft thread weaving through the warm, still air. She may tell of a festival from long ago, or of a nobleman who once composed poems so beautiful they made even the river pause. These stories are not told for entertainment, but for remembrance. They are quiet markers of continuity, gentle reminders that the lives of these women are not fleeting shadows, but part of a lineage stretching far beyond the present moment. The midday hours by the Nile are also a time for subtle alliances. It is here, away from the listening walls of the houses of pleasure, that women exchange soft warnings about difficult clients, share advice on safer remedies, or discreetly arrange introductions to more favorable patrons. These exchanges are never formal, never obvious. They are woven seamlessly into the flow of conversation, a glance here, a small touch on the arm there, ensuring that knowledge and protection flow as freely as the river beside them. And yet, amidst these practicalities, the overarching feeling is one of profound calm. There's something about the presence of the Nile, its endless, unhurried movement, that encourages reflection without urgency. The women, often so skilled in reading the desires of others, allow themselves, in these moments, to simply exist without expectation. They listen to their own breathing, feel the warmth of the earth beneath their palms, trace patterns in the sand with absent fingers dot as the sun begins its slow descent. The air shifts. A slight breeze stirs the reeds, carrying with it the promise of evening's cooler touch. The women, sensing the subtle change, begin to gather their things, folding mats with practiced ease, refastening jewelry, smoothing linen garments back into place. But they do not rush. The rhythm of the river has seeped into their movements, guiding them gently from rest back into readiness. They will return to their houses, their bodies refreshed, their minds calmed, prepared for their quiet performance of the evening shift. For them, this midday respite is more than a break. It is a necessity, a space where the demands of beauty and performance fall away, where they can reclaim a piece of themselves that is not given to others, but held in quiet reserve. Walking back through the winding paths, their footsteps stir. Little clouds of dust, yet their hearts carry a softness, a slow, grounding presence gifted by the river. They know the hours ahead will be filled with the soft clink of cups, the careful painting of eyes, the weaving of stories meant to charm and soothe. But for now they have been nourished, in body and spirit, by the quiet companionship of water, shade, and the ancient pulse of the Nile dot as they disappear back into the city's embrace. The river remains, its current whispering softly against the banks, waiting patiently for their return dot in the quiet spaces between work and ritual. There exists a network of whispers, threads of conversation, delicate yet strong, weaving through the lives of the women in Egypt's houses of pleasure. For those who spend their days and nights tending to the desires of others, these moments of private exchange are not merely social flourishes. They are lifelines dot as the sun dips lower and shadows lengthen across the clay walls of Thebes. The courtesans retreat into shaded alcoves and quiet upper rooms, spaces just wide enough to sit close, yet hidden enough to speak freely. These are not grand holes, but intimate corners filled with soft cushions, reed mats, and small oil lamps whose glow casts their faces in amber hues. The hum of the city fades here, replaced by the softer music of shared breath and rustling linen dot. It is here, in these hushed gatherings, that the true pulse of their world is felt, a network of friendships, alliances, and careful watchfulness that stretches far beyond the brothel's walls. Gossip in this space is not idle or frivolous. It is a tool, a method of mapping the ever-shifting terrain of Thebes' social landscape. Who has fallen from favor? Who has secured a new patron? Which merchant's silver tongue hides a cruel hand? All of this is exchanged in voices barely louder than a murmur. The act of sharing such knowledge is delicate, almost ritualistic. A woman leans in slightly, the golden beads at her temple catching the lamplight, and offers a soft observation about a nobleman's recent misfortunes. Another responds with a half smile, perhaps a small shake of her head, as she offers a new thread, a tale of a scribe who seeks discreet companionship, or a warning about a visiting dignitary whose appetite for pleasure is matched only by his lack of discretion. These conversations are laced with careful pauses, with glances that speak as much as words. Trust is not given lightly here. Each piece of information offered is a small act of vulnerability, a gesture of alliance. And in return, another thread is given a favor, a secret, a quiet promise of support. Among the women, there exists a silent hierarchy, not always visible to outsiders. It is not solely determined by beauty or youth, but by skill, wit, and the subtle art of reading a room. An elder courtesan, perhaps no longer favored for her charms, holds a different kind of power. She remembers names, favors owed, stories that have been half buried beneath layers of time. Her words are listened to with the same reverence as a priestess interpreting omens. In these gatherings, moments of laughter rise gently, like bubbles in a clay cup of wine. Stories are told with a wry humor as women recount the follies of overeager clients, or the elaborate lies spun by men who believe their flattery is unique. Yet beneath the amusement, there is a shared understanding, a recognition of the delicate dance they all perform. Navigating a world where admiration can so easily tip into exploitation, within the houses of pleasure, rivalries do exist, but they are often tempered by a greater need for solidarity. The women know that their safety, their livelihood, often depends on the strength of the network they build among themselves. A careless word, a betrayal, can ripple outward, fraying the delicate fabric of mutual protection. And so alliances are tended with care, not out of sentimental sisterhood, but from a shared understanding of survival. There are, of course, private friendships woven within this tapestry. Bonds formed not from necessity, but from quiet moments of shared humanity. Two women brushing each other's hair by the light of a single lamp, exchanging soft reflections about dreams, fears, or the memory of a family left behind in a distant village. These are the conversations that require no strategic edge. Simple, human moments of connection that offer a different kind of balm to hearts accustomed to performance at times. These small gatherings become informal councils of wisdom. A younger courtesan, uncertain of how to manage a particularly persistent patron, may seek the counsel of her elder peers. The advice offered is practical, grounded in years of experience. How to deflect unwanted attention without offense. Which oils best mask the scent of cheap beer on a client's breath. When to refuse and when refusal carries its own risks. The act of passing down such knowledge is almost ceremonial. There is no formal schooling for this life, no scrolls outlining the etiquette of subtle refusals or the art of coaxing generosity from a tight-fisted merchant. All of it is learned through these whispered exchanges. Through stories shared while weaving beads into one another's hair, or while adjusting the drape of a linen shawl dot in these quiet hours, objects pass between hands as naturally as words. A small vial of perfumed oil, its scent specially blended to signal availability or disinterest. A strip of linen dyed in a particular hue, indicating connections to certain temple circles. Even jewelry, simple at first glance, carries meanings deciphered only by those within the network. A copper bracelet worn on the right ankle, a shell pendant hidden beneath a garment, each a signpost in a language of subtlety. As evening deepens, and the oil in the lamps burns lower, the tone of conversation softens further. The practical exchanges give way to quieter reflections. The nature of longing, the bittersweet joy of fleeting connections, the quiet ache of watching clients move on. Their affections as transient as the Nile's shifting currents, yet even in these moments tinged with melancholy, there is no air of despair. These women are no strangers to the impermanence of affection. They understand that their craft is not about permanence, but presence, about being fully attuned in the moment, offering beauty, wit, and solace in a world that often demands more than it gives in return, when the lamps are finally extinguished. And the women part ways, there is an unspoken acknowledgement in their glances. They have tended to their alliances, reinforced the invisible web of knowledge and trust that cradles them within a world both admiring and precarious. Theirs is a world built not on grand declarations or formal contracts, but on the soft rustle of linen as women lean in close, on the barely audible exchange of secrets beneath the hum of temple chants, on the subtle art of ensuring that no woman stands alone. As they return to their chambers, the quiet of the night does not feel empty. It is filled with the weight of stories, of promises whispered and understood, of intricate sisterhood that stretches across courtyards and alleyways, beyond the glitter of noble feasts, beyond the stone walls of temples, lingering in the small, sacred spaces where women gather, speak, and safeguard one another. As dusk descends upon Thebes, a subtle shift stirs in the houses of pleasure. The city's breath slows, yet beneath the surface, new rhythms begin to pulse. Lamps are lit, their golden light flickering against earthen walls. Fresh linen is smoothed over low tables. Clay cups are arranged with care. The day's toil melts into the softer rituals of evening, when the art of presence becomes as crucial as the art of beauty for the courtesans of Egypt. These evening hours are not merely a time of labor, but a delicate dance, a quiet courtship, played out in shadows and soft laughter. Tonight, the guests will be merchants with ships docked along the Nile, nobles seeking respite from courtly intrigues, scribes whose hands are ink-stained but whose tongues are silvered. These are men accustomed to the art of acquisition, but here, within these softly lit chambers, they too seek to be won over. The courtesans move through these spaces with practiced grace. Their steps are measured, their gestures precise. A glance, a tilt of the head, the faintest curve of a smile. Every movement is layered with intention, yet it unfolds with such softness that it seems entirely natural, as though the evening itself had choreographed it to court wealth in Thebes. is not to chase after it with garish displays. It is to create an atmosphere where the wealthy feel their importance without having to proclaim it. A courtesan may approach a merchant not with bold words, but with a soft inquiry about his latest voyage, her fingers briefly grazing the carved amulet at his wrist as if an idle curiosity. It is in this gentle weaving of personal attention and subtle flattery that the true work begins. Entertainment is never just entertainment. A song offered is not merely to fill the air, but to reveal the singer's wit, her ability to play with words, to mirror the guest's desires within the melody. A harp's soft pluck is not background sound, but a thread that binds the guest's attention, drawing him into a space where time slows, and the present moment becomes all that exists. Stories are shared with deliberate cadence. A tale of a Pharaoh's lavish festival might segue into a playful observation about the guest's own revelries. Laughter, when it comes, is light, but it ripples outward, weaving a net of warmth and familiarity. Here, words are chosen as carefully as perfumes, each designed to leave a lingering trace, to evoke a mood that clings long after the evening has passed. The women know that wealth is not merely in coin, but in influence, in promises made behind closed doors, and names that open further thresholds. And so, the courtship is layered, a careful balance of offering charm without seeming to need, of suggesting exclusivity without closing doors, patrons. Whether merchants of spice-laden ships or officials with scrolls of decrees are gently guided into this realm of curated intimacy. Their stories are listened to with a kind of attentive ease that is neither forced nor falsely exuberant. In return, they are given small tokens, a verse composed on the spot, a delicate sketch of a lotus in ink, a softly whispered phrase meant only for them. These gifts, intangible yet potent, are what set apart a fleeting encounter from a lasting impression. Sometimes, the wealthiest patrons require no grand performances, but rather a companion who can navigate the currents of their silence. 2. Sit with a nobleman as he sips date wine, offering no more than a calm presence, can be as valuable as the most elaborate song. Understanding when to speak and when to let silence settle is an art that few master, yet within these walls, it is as essential as the coal lining their eyes. Negotiations often unfold in these quiet spaces, though rarely in direct terms. A courtesan might trace patterns on a clay cup as she alludes to a friend's recent acquisition of fine linen, the guest catching the thread and offering, in turn, a discreet invitation to discuss arrangements further. There is a language beneath. The spoken word where gestures, glances, and the rhythm of conversation become as binding as any written contract. These evenings are not driven by haste. Courting a wealthy patron is not a transaction completed in an hour, but a slow layering of interactions. A merchant may return several times, each visit deepening the subtle bond, until generosity becomes a natural outpouring rather than a calculated expense. For the courtesans, wealth is not merely measured in gifts or coin left behind. True success lies in the weaving of long-term patronage, an arrangement where both giver and receiver feel they have chosen freely, where the exchange is wrapped in layers of respect, allure, and mutual understanding. The rooms themselves participate in this courtship. Incense burns in quiet spirals, carrying the scent of frankincense and myrrh through the air, creating a sensory veil that blurs the edges of the outside world. Cushions are arranged in inviting clusters, low tables set with figs, honeyed cakes, and carafes of sweetened wine. The atmosphere whispers of indulgence, yet it does so with a gentleness that never overwhelms, and amidst this curated softness, alliances are forged, some lasting mere weeks, others spanning seasons. A merchant whose ships bring rare lapis may choose to favor a courtesan not simply for her beauty, but for her wit in conversation, her ability to discuss trade routes with an ease that flatters his intelligence. A nobleman might return again and again to a house of pleasure, not out of lust, but because the women there remember his favorite song, or the story of his childhood that no one else has asked him about in years. By night's end, promises have been exchanged in ways that seem entirely incidental. A whispered suggestion of a future meeting, a casual mention of an upcoming festival where company would be welcome. These threads, though light, are woven into a sturdy fabric of connection, ensuring that the patron will return, and with him, his wealth and influence as the guests depart into the cool hush of night. The courtesans remain, lingering in the soft glow of remaining oil lamps. They move slowly, unhurried, knowing that the work they have done is not in the cups emptied or songs sung, but in the impressions left behind, impressions that will echo in the minds of their patrons long after the doors have closed. For them, these evenings are not about conquest, but cultivation. Each guest, each conversation, is a seed planted, to be tended with care, watered with subtlety, and harvested in due time. There's no need for haste. Wealth, like the Nile, follows its own current, and those who understand its rhythm know that the richest rewards come to those who wait with grace as the sun lowers behind the palm groves, casting the city of Thebes in a warm amber glow. A different kind of rhythm awakens within the houses of pleasure. The air still clinging to the day's warmth begins to soften, and with it, the pulse of the city slows. It is in this in-between hour, not yet night, but no longer day, that the courtesans begin the slow, deliberate transformation that will carry them into the evening shift. This time of day is not marked by urgency. There is no flurry, hurried steps, or clatter of tools. Instead, it is a ritual of patience, a careful preparation where each gesture, each small act of adornment, is performed with a calm precision. The women move through the brothel's inner rooms, their bare feet silent against the cool stone, as they ready themselves for the night's work. The scent of lotus oil drifts through the air as small jars are opened, their contents glistening in the soft lamplight. Fingers nimble and practiced anoint skin with slow, circular motions, smoothing away the dust of the afternoon and replacing it with a subtle sheen. The oil clings to the skin, not heavy, but with a delicate shimmer, as if the women were wrapping themselves in a second. Perfumed skin designed to catch the attention of anyone who comes too close. Coal sticks are carefully rolled between fingers. The malachite pigment mixed with fresh animal fat to ensure it glides smoothly along the eyelids. With a small polished shard of bronze as a mirror, the women darken the rims of their eyes, not with the sharp, dramatic strokes of the morning, but with softer lines, creating a look that whispers rather than shouts. The effect is intentional. As twilight deepens, the play of light and shadow will turn their gazes into pools of quiet allure. Reflective and unreadable, linen garments laundered and dried in the noonday sun are now unfurled and draped with a particular elegance. The fabric is thin, almost translucent in places, yet the way it is folded and fastened is a craft in itself. It conceals as much as it reveals, designed not for exposure, but for suggestion. Beaded belts cinch at the hips, their weight a gentle reminder of each step taken. The soft clink of faience beads adding a subtle rhythm to their movements. Jewelry is chosen with care, not merely for beauty, but for the stories it tells. A bronze bracelet gifted by a traveling scribe, a pendant carved from ivory, a token from a former patron, delicate anklets whose bells are so small that their sound is felt more than heard. Each piece serves as a silent introduction, a conversation. Begun without words. As the preparations continue, the atmosphere within the house shifts. The rooms are no longer merely spaces of rest and respite. They begin to hum with a soft energy, as if the walls themselves are preparing to breathe differently. Lamps are trimmed, their wicks adjusted to emit a glow that is more amber than gold, creating pools of warmth amidst the cooler shadows. Reed mats are shaken out, low tables wiped clean, cups arranged in anticipation. Outside, the first guests will begin to arrive soon, but there is no rush. In this house, arrivals are staggered, welcomed into a mood rather than an event. The courtesans know that their task is not to fill the space with noise, but to cultivate a certain stillness, A space where a guest can feel the day's burdens melt away the moment they cross the threshold. The transition from daylight to night is not abrupt. Here, it is a slow unfolding, a layered descent into softness. The laughter that will come later, the shared songs, the quiet flirtations, all of these are seen now. In these moments of quiet preparation, where the women ready not just their appearances, but their minds. Some sit for a moment alone, closing their eyes, letting their breathing steady. Others share soft murmurs with a trusted companion, exchanging a last-minute detail about a returning patron or a new visitor whose mood must be carefully gauged. These conversations are not loud or hurried. They are as fluid as the smoke rising from a fresh coil of incense. Even as the evening deepens, the space does not swell with fanfare. Instead, the first guests are met with an atmosphere of calm invitation. A courtesan greets a merchant with a gesture of open palms, guiding him to a cushioned alcove where sweetened wine and figs await. Another offers a nobleman a cooling cloth for his brow, speaking softly about the dust of the city streets and how this house offers a reprieve. Music begins, but it is not grand. A single harp is plucked gently in a corner, its notes blending with the occasional trill of a flute. The sound is not designed to command attention, but to weave into the background, creating an invisible tapestry of sound that smooths the edges. Of conversation. For the women, the evening shift is not a matter of simply entertaining. It is a careful balancing act, a continuous reading of mood and undercurrents. A guest who enters tense is offered laughter in small doses, eased into a space where his own stories can surface. Another, who arrives eager and loud, is guided into a slower rhythm. His energy met with a calmness that invites reflection rather than noise. It is not uncommon for a courtesan to spend long stretches of time in simple conversation. Never once. Resorting to overt seduction. The art here is in presence, in making a guest feel seen, not as a conquest, but as a participant in a shared moment of calm indulgence. As the night wears on, the house breathes in waves. Moments of soft laughter ripple through the rooms, followed by pockets of near silence where only the clink of a cup or the faint rustle of linen can be heard. The guests are not hurried in their departures. Each lingers until they feel the weight of the day has been gently lifted, until they are ready to step back into the night, carrying with them the soft afterglow of their time within these walls. For the courtesans, the slow ritual of nightfall is more than a shift in time. It is a practice of transformation, not only of self, but of space, of mood, of the very air around them. They shape the evening with gestures as subtle as the flicker of a lamp flame, as quiet as the brush of a hand against a clay cup. And when the final guest has departed, the house does not collapse into exhaustion. Instead, the women move with the same grace they began with, extinguishing lamps, folding linens, sharing soft glances that speak of a job well done. There is a serenity in these closing moments, a quiet pride in the knowledge that the evening was not rushed or wasted, but fully inhabited. As they return to their chambers, unfastening beads and washing away the layers of oil, there is no sense of shedding a false self. Rather, it is a return, a slow, gentle retreat into stillness, knowing that the same care they offered others will now be turned inward. As the night deepens and the city beyond the walls drifts into sleep. In the quiet moments before the evenings, guests arrive when the last rays of sunlight cling to the city's limestone walls. There's a quiet ritual that unfolds within the inner chambers of Thebes' houses of pleasure. It is a ritual not of loud fanfare or overt display, but of small, deliberate choices. A dance of adornment where every bracelet, every scent, and every subtle marking tells a story. For the courtesans of Egypt, the language of appearance is not a simple matter of beauty. It is a complex vocabulary of symbols, whispers, and unspoken promises. Jewelry, in particular, holds a special power. Not just an accessory, it is a form of quiet declaration, a message crafted in gold and faience. In carnelian and lapis lazuli, a simple anklet, when worn on the left ankle, might signal availability, while a matching set on both feet might suggest a courtesan reserved for private patronage. These codes are never spoken aloud. They are understood in the gentle clink of beads as a woman crosses the threshold, in the way a bracelet slides up a forearm as she raises a cup to her lips. Necklaces, too, are chosen with care. Their colors and patterns hinting at a woman's affiliations, her past patrons, or her personal preferences. A choker alternating turquoise and gold might suggest ties to a noble house, while a pendant carved in the shape of a lotus could be a quiet homage to a temple sisterhood. There is no handbook for these meanings. They are passed through glances, through whispered advice from older courtesans to younger ones, through the slow accumulation of understanding that comes from moving through the world with eyes attuned. To subtlety, tattoos, though less openly displayed, carry an even more intimate language. They are not the sprawling, ornate designs one might imagine, but small, discrete symbols etched into skin in places where they can be hidden or revealed at will. A tiny papyrus bloom inked at the nape of the neck, visible only when a woman tilts. Her head just so. A delicate ank traced along the inside of a wrist, glimpsed fleetingly as a cup is offered. These markings are not flamboyant claims of identity, but soft personal mantras, reminders of lineage, of beliefs of quiet defiance. Among certain circles, tattoos also serve as quiet signposts. A serpent coiled near the hip bone might indicate a courtesan skilled in specific rites of pleasure, knowledge passed down through generations. A small sistrum inked behind the ear could suggest a woman with ties to temple festivities, blending sacred dance with sensual artistry. Yet, these meanings are fluid, never rigid. They shift with time, with the wearer's own evolving story. But perhaps the most intricate language of all is a perfume. Scents in ancient Egypt are not mere embellishments. They are declarations, invitations, sometimes even warnings. A courtesan does not simply wear a scent. She composes it, layering notes as a poet layers words. The oils are mixed by hand in small alabaster jars. The ingredients chosen with an intimacy that few understand. Lotus oil, light and sweet, might be worn by a courtesan seeking to appear youthful and carefree, her laughter as soft as the petals themselves. Myrrh, darker and resinous, might be applied sparingly by a woman, whose evening is reserved for a patron of influence, its depth suggesting an experience beyond the frivolous. Frankincense, with its temple associations, is chosen for evenings, when the line between sacred and sensual must blur, its smoky tendrils creating an aura of reverence. The application of perfume is itself a ritual. Small dabs are placed behind the ears, at the hollow of the throat, along the insides of the wrists, where the warmth of the skin will coax the scent outward in slow, teasing waves. Some courtesans anoint the arches of their feet, so that as they move, the fragrance is released in rhythm with their steps, an olfactory trail that lingers, subtle and inescapable. Among the more practiced women, perfumes are used not only for allure but for conversation. A courtesan might blend a particular oil mixture on the evening of a merchant's return, using a scent he once complimented as a wordless welcome. Another might craft a new, intriguing combination designed to spark curiosity, to invite a patron into a dialogue about its origins, its ingredients, its effect. In these exchanges, scent becomes a bridge, a starting point for stories that weave intimacy without ever needing to state their intent outright. It is not only the courtesans who understand this language. The guests, too, learn to read the signs, to attune their senses to these soft cues. A nobleman may notice the absence of a woman's usual jasmine and understand that her mood has shifted. A scribe, sensitive to the subtleties of ink and parchment, might catch the faint hint of cedarwood and recognize it as a gesture meant for him alone. In these quiet games of recognition, bonds are formed that are far more enduring than any overt proposition. The layering of jewelry, tattoos, and perfume is not a matter of vanity, but a daily act of crafting one's narrative. The courtesans are, in many ways, authors of their own identities, curating how they are seen, how they are perceived, and what remains hidden. Every adornment chosen is a sentence in an unwritten story, every scent a lingering ellipsis that invites the listener to lean closer, to decipher more. There is an empowerment in this mastery of subtle codes. In a society where a woman's place is often dictated by birth, these quiet languages offer a form of authorship. They allow the courtesans to shape their own space within the world, to navigate the layered social currents with grace and intent. A glance at a bracelet, a fleeting glimpse of ink beneath linen, the ghost of a perfume note, these are the tools with which they carve their presence into a world that too often overlooks them as the evening deepens and the house begins to fill with the soft hum of conversation. These codes are already at work, long before a single word is exchanged. A guest feels a pulse of intrigue not because he has been directly addressed, but because the soft bell of an anklet, the shimmer of an earring, or the faintest trace of blue lotus has woven him into a silent dialogue. And for the courtesans, there is a quiet satisfaction in this dance of subtlety. They know that true power lies not in shouting to be heard, but in crafting a presence so delicately intricate that to ignore it would be to miss a vital thread in the evening's tapestry. As the night wears on, these unspoken languages continue to weave their soft spell. Jewelry catches lamplight and reflects it into corners of the room where glances are exchanged. Tattoos, glimpsed only in brief, become silent invitations to curiosity. Scents bloom slowly, transforming the air itself into a shared memory. Lingering trace that will remain long after the evening's laughter has faded in the quiet hours after the last guest departs. As the lamps are extinguished one by one, these adornments are removed with the same care with which they were chosen. Anklets are unfastened, bracelets slid off wrists, the delicate chain of a necklace coiled gently into a clay jar. The tattoos, of course, remain silent witnesses to the day's encounters. Their meanings unchanged, yet subtly deepened by each new layer of experience. The perfumes, though fading, will linger still, clinging to the skin, to the folds of linen, to the very air of the house itself. They are the last whispers of the evening's unspoken conversations, a final message carried into the hush of night as the city of Thebes stirs with the bustle of merchants. Priests and craftsmen, there are those who move through its streets, with a quiet grace, conscious of every glance that follows them. For the courtesans of ancient Egypt, public spaces are not just places of commerce and conversation. They are stages upon which the delicate dance of reputation unfolds. Every step is measured, every gesture carefully weighed, for in a world where beauty is both an asset and a scrutiny, a woman's ability to navigate public perception can determine the course of her entire life, unlike the rigid moral judgments that later civilizations would impose upon the profession of sex work. The Egyptians held a more fluid, though complex, view. Pleasure, beauty, and sensuality were seen as integral parts of life's balance, but even so, the women who traded in these arts needed to master the subtle art of respectability. Not because their work was inherently shame, but because a woman's standing in the community was a fragile thing, subject to whispers, to rivalries, to the ever-shifting tides of favor for many courtesans. Maintaining an air of dignity was as important as mastering the arts of song, dance, and conversation. To be seen as a woman of discretion was a coveted reputation, one that could open doors to the private courts of nobility, or secure invitations to exclusive gatherings where powerful merchants sought cultured companionship. This was not a reputation granted freely. It was earned meticulously through years of careful alliances, cultivated relationships, and the quiet ability to know when to speak and when to remain silent in the marketplace, where linen stalls fluttered in the breeze, and vendors called out the day's prices. A courtesan's walk was deliberate, her gaze steady. She did not need to shout to be noticed. A slight tilt of her chin, the way sunlight caught the edge of her earring, was often enough to draw attention without seeming to seek it. She understood the fine line between allure and ostentation, between being admired and being gossiped about. The same dress that might draw appreciative glances at a festival could be considered too bold for a morning in the market. And so adjustments were made. A light shawl here, a modest pin there. subtle shifts that spoke of an innate understanding. Of social rhythm, reputation, however, was not built on appearance alone. Wit and intelligence were equally vital currencies. Within court circles, a courtesan who could speak elegantly about poetry, who knew the proper rituals for pouring wine, who could quote a line from an ancient hymn at just the right moment. Such a woman was not seen as a mere ornament, but as a valuable companion. In these quiet games of conversation, information was a powerful tool. A courtesan who listened more than she spoke could gather small but potent secrets, tidbits of court. Intrigue that, when shared with discretion, elevated her standing among those who valued subtle influence. Yet, public perception was a delicate balance. Too much familiarity with a patron could spark jealousy. Too much distance could be read as arrogance. The courtesans had to navigate these undercurrents with the same poise as a dancer stepping. Across shifting sands, friendships with temple priestesses offered one form of social shield: ties. To the sacred lent an air of sanctity to a woman's name. Associations with respected merchants or scribes, if managed with care, could anchor a courtesan's reputation within the world of commerce and intellect, rather than idle gossip. There were, of course, dangers. A careless word from a rival, an indiscreet patron, or a moment of public misstep could threaten to unravel the years of careful crafting. The courtesans understood the importance of controlling their own narratives. A rumor, once born, could only be countered by an act of quiet. Grace, an act of generosity witnessed by the right people. A performance at a festival that reminded the community of her artistry, or a subtle gift to a temple that aligned her with the forces of Mat. The balance and order revered by all dot for those women who succeeded in mastering these nuances. The rewards were substantial. They could ascend into circles of influence. Their company sought not just for their beauty, but for their counsel. Some became trusted confidants to nobles, their voices quietly influencing decisions behind closed doors. Others leveraged their social standing to secure favorable marriages, using their wit and reputation to transition from courtesans to respected matrons of influential households. But for many, the truest reward lay not in titles or wealth, but in the autonomy their cultivated respectability afforded them. To walk through the streets of Thebes, head held high, greeted with respectful nods rather than furtive glances, was a triumph of quiet perseverance. These women carved out spaces for themselves in a society where a woman's voice could easily be dismissed, not through defiance, but through the patient weaving of relationships, through the daily acts of dignity that solidified their place in the fabric of the city. Among themselves, the courtesans shared the wisdom of these social strategies. Older women mentored the younger ones, not just in the arts of beauty or performance, but in the subtleties of public behavior. There were lessons on how to navigate conversations without revealing too much, how to recognize the fleeting nature of certain patrons' promises, how to read the hidden alliances within a gathering. This network of mutual support, quiet but unbreakable, was a shield against the harsher judgments of the world. And yet, for all their careful maneuvering, the courtesans knew that their respectability was a living thing, never static, always in need of nurturing. A single festival could elevate a woman's standing. A single scandal could diminish it. But within this ebb and flow, they found a certain rhythm, an acceptance of life's impermanence. They became artists not just of dance and music, but of social balance, maintaining their place upon a stage where the audience was always watching, yet never fully understanding the depth of the performance before them as the sun set upon the city and the courtyards filled with the soft glow of oil lamps. These women moved with the same quiet grace that had carried them through the day. In the privacy of their chambers, they would unpin their hair, remove their jewelry, and reflect upon the small victories and quiet negotiations that had passed unnoticed by most. They understood that reputation was not built in grand gestures, but in these daily, almost invisible acts of care. Even centuries later, when the stones of Thebes would crumble and the names of many would fade from records, the legacy of these courtesans, their quiet resilience, their mastery of self-presentation, their intricate navigation of a world that sought to both admire and define them, would remain, woven into the very fabric of history's quieter corners dot in the soft hush of night, when only the cicadas and the distant lapping of the Nile remain awake. One can almost imagine their steps echoing still, a testament to the art of living gracefully within a world that rarely sees beyond the surface. When the sun dips low over the clay rooftops of Thebes, and the markets fall into a hush, there is a softer music that begins to stir in the shaded courtyards and private rooms. The courtesans of ancient Egypt, those women so adept at navigating glances and whispers, also held another power, one woven into melodies, carried on the notes of flutes and the delicate plucking of harp strings. To understand their world is to listen not to the loud clamor of history, but to the quiet songs that drifted through their lives like an unseen river dot in a world without written music. Melodies lived in the bodies and memories of women. Songs passed from mother to daughter, from elder courtesan to young apprentice, each note a thread binding generations together. These were not the grand hymns sung in temple halls, but softer tunes, songs of longing, of laughter, of private heartaches and quiet triumphs. They were lullabies for the restless and ballads for the lonely, music meant to soothe not crowds, but single souls. The sistrum, the small sacred rattle associated with temple rituals, often made its way into secular gatherings, into shimmering cadence marking the rhythm of a dancer's steps. But in more intimate settings, the courtesan's instruments of choice were simpler, humbler. The hand-held harp curved gently like the arc of a crescent moon, and the reed flute, whose hollow body could summon the softest sighs of sound. In private upper rooms where oil lamps flickered against walls lined with woven mats, a courtesan would often reach for her harp as a way to set the tone of an evening. The act was never hurried. She would sit gracefully upon a low cushion, the harp resting lightly against her shoulder, and begin to pluck the strings with slow deliberation. The notes, fragile and clear, would fill the space between conversation and silence, inviting those present to settle into a quieter frame of mind. It was in these moments that the courtesan's true artistry revealed itself, not in the boldness of performance, but in the gentleness of presence. Her songs were invitations, not commands. A nobleman, wearied by the politics of court, might find his worries softened by a melody about the swaying reeds along the Nile. A merchant, tense from the bartering of goods, could be coaxed into calm by a tune that recalled the laughter of distant festivals. Flutes, too, held a special place in the courtesan's repertoire. Carved from reeds or polished wood, these instruments required breath to sing, breath that was controlled, shaped, and released with intention. In the hands of a skilled courtesan, the flute's voice could be as playful as a breeze rustling through papyrus or as mournful as the call of an ibis at dusk. The music was not for spectacle, but for weaving subtle atmospheres, for guiding the emotional undercurrents of a gathering without a single word being spoken. But music, for these women, was not solely a tool of their profession. It was also a refuge. In the quiet hours after clients had departed, a courtesan might sit alone, her harp cradled gently against her, and play melodies that were meant only for herself. These were songs of self-reflection, tunes that allowed her to process the day's many faces and conversations. In these private rituals, music became a kind of diary, each note an unspoken entry, each refrain a whispered remembrance. The songs shared among courtesans also carried within them the stories that were often too dangerous or delicate to speak. Aloud, a melody might recall a lost lover, another might warn subtly of a patron known for breaking promises. In this way, music served as a coded language, a form of storytelling, that allowed women to communicate truths in a society where discretion was often their greatest armor in gatherings among themselves. Away from the eyes of patrons or priests, courtesans would often form small ensembles. One might play the harp, another the flute, while a third added rhythm with soft claps or the gentle tap of a drum. Their voices, layered in soft harmonies, filled the air with songs that told of their shared experiences, songs of river journeys, of temple festivals, of quiet yearnings for lives that drifted just beyond reach. For younger courtesans, learning these songs was a rite of passage. The elder women would teach not just the notes, but the stories behind them, the context that gave the melody its depth. A simple love song might, in fact, be a lesson in patience. A lullaby might conceal a tale of personal resilience. Through these shared songs, the younger women absorbed not just musical skill, but the accumulated wisdom of their predecessors. Among the nobility, a courtesan's musical abilities were highly prized. To be known as a skilled musician was to elevate oneself from mere entertainer to cultured companion. In private salons, a courtesan might be asked to perform not only for the pleasure of the guests, but as a subtle display of her education and refinement. It was in these performances that the courtesan could influence moods, soften negotiations, or draw attention away from tense discussions with a well-timed melody. But beyond these social functions, music remained, at its core, a form of connection, a bridge between individuals, between emotions, between the earthly and the divine. In temple festivals where sistrums and tambourines echoed beneath stone colonnades, the courtesan songs became offerings to the gods, their melodies rising like incense into the open sky. The beauty of this musical tradition was its ephemerality. Unlike scrolls of papyrus that chronicled history in ink, these songs existed only in the moment of their performance, carried forward through memory and breath. They were living artifacts, shaped anew by each woman who sang them, infused with the nuances of her own life, her own experiences, even in their quietest moments. Courtesans understood the power of song to transform a space. A simple room with clay walls and a single oil lamp could become a sanctuary when filled with music. The burdens of daily survival, the sharp edges of public scrutiny, softened beneath the tender glow of melody. For the women who lived by their wits in their craft, these songs were not luxuries. They were necessities, threads of beauty woven through the tapestry of their daily lives dot as the evening deepens and the city retreats into a hush. The last notes of a courtesan's harp drift upward, lingering like a soft breath before dissolving into silence. In that silence, there is a deep reverence, not for grand temples or towering monuments, but for the simple, profound act of a woman creating beauty, moment by moment, in a world that rarely paused to listen, and yet, if one listens closely. Even now, across the span of centuries, one might still hear the faint echo of their songs, soft, resilient, timeless, whispering through the corridors of history when the last guest has departed, when the soft hum of music fades into silence, and the clink of cups becomes a distant memory, a gentle stillness descends upon the house of pleasure. In this quiet hour, beneath the soft glow of a single oil lamp, the courtesans of ancient Egypt return to a space untouched by performance, a space of solitude, of self-care, where the world's many demands are momentarily set aside. For women whose days are filled with curated glances and careful conversations, these private rituals become a sanctuary. It is not grand, this solitude, not a sweeping escape into wild landscapes or distant journeys. Rather, it is found in small, deliberate acts. The careful untwisting of a beaded braid, the unfastening of anklets that have whispered with every step, the slow release of pins from a coiffed knot of hair. Each movement is unhurried, as if the very act of slowing down is a quiet form of rebellion against the relentless rhythm of public life. In a corner of her room, a shallow basin of water gleams in the lamplight. She dips a cloth into its coolness and begins to cleanse the day from her skin, the traces of coal that had defined her gaze, the shimmer of perfumed oils that had danced along her wrists and collarbones. This is not a hurried washing, but a meditative gesture, a recentering of self. The water carries away not just the physical remnants of the day, but the lingering echoes of conversations, of roles played, of expectations gently deflected. Is a silence in these moments that is deeper than mere absence of sound. It is a cocoon, a soft enclosure where the courtesan reclaims her name, her thoughts, her unspoken desires. She might sit upon a cushion, knees drawn to her chest, gazing out through the narrow window slits to the star-scattered sky. The night. Air carries a faint breath of Nile mist, mingling with the subtle aroma of dried lotus petals kept in a small bowl nearby. These quiet sensory notes, the coolness of water, the soft crackle of an oil lamp's flame, the earthy scent of linen, become anchors. Gentle reminders that amidst the artifice of daily life, there exists a place of authenticity in some. Homes, women keep small. Personal shrines within their chambers. Modest altars adorned with amulets. Tiny figurines of Hathor or Bastet, deities who understood both pleasure and protection. Before retreating to sleep, a courtesan might light a sliver of incense, watching the thin thread of smoke curl upwards as she murmurs a quiet prayer, not a plea for wealth or favor, but a simple wish for balance, for the grace to move through. Another day with dignity intact. Journaling, though not always in the form we recognize today, was another ritual of private reflection. Some women kept small bundles of papyrus scraps upon which they scribbled verses, fragments of thoughts, or sketches of patterns for future beadwork. These were not records meant for others' eyes, but intimate expressions, a silent conversation with oneself. In these quiet moments of writing or sketching, a courtesan could distill the swirl of her experiences into something tangible, something her own. Rest itself was treated as an act of care, not merely a necessity. Before lying down, she might gently massage her feet with a paste of crushed myrrh and oil, soothing away the ache of hours spent standing, walking, performing. She would shake out her linen sheets, ensuring no stray reed fragments clung to the fabric, then settle beneath them with a deep, measured breath. The chamber is modest, perhaps just a single low bed, a woven mat, a few clay jars, but within its simplicity lies a profound sense of ownership. This space is hers untouched by negotiation or expectation. Even sleep for these women was approached as a ritual. The act of allowing oneself to drift into rest after a day of constant vigilance was an act of trust in the safety of their carefully maintained world. Some might hum soft lullabies passed down from childhood, songs whose lyrics spoke of river, reeds and moonlit fields, anchoring them in memories untouched by the complexities of there were evenings when solitude felt like a balm, a soft retreat into the self. Yet there were also nights when the quiet hummed with a gentle ache of loneliness. In those moments, courtesans often found solace in the presence of one another. It was not uncommon for two women to share a quiet drink, seated side by side, beneath a narrow window, speaking in whispers or simply sitting in companionable silence. These bonds, formed in the soft hours after business was concluded, became a vital network of emotional sustenance, a reminder that amidst the transactional nature of their work, genuine connection still had its place, the rhythm of self-care, extended beyond the nightly routine. On days when the city's demands were less pressing, courtesans would tend to small acts of beauty not for the gaze of others, but for their own sense of well-being. Weaving new patterns of beads, experimenting with blends of perfumed oils, or practicing a new melody upon the harp, these were acts of self-investment, affirmations of one's identity beyond the roles the world assigned in these quiet acts. There was a profound understanding that self-care was not indulgence, but necessity. To preserve one's spirit amidst the shifting tides of favor and fortune required more than skill and wit. It demanded a deliberate nurturing of the self. The courtesans of ancient Egypt, in their small, unspoken rituals of self-attention, embodied this wisdom long before it would be named or celebrated. And so, as the night deepens and the city slips fully into sleep, a single oil lamp burns low in a courtesan's chamber. She lies upon her mat, her breathing steady, her mind quiet. The world beyond her door continues in its endless rhythms. But within this small space, time softens, becoming a gentle pool of stillness in the grand scrolls of history. It is easy to lose sight of these moments, the private, unspectacular acts that weave the true fabric of a life. Yet, It is here, in these quiet rituals of self-care and solitude, that the courtesan's truest strength reveals itself. Not in the performances or the careful courtships, but in the soft, deliberate choice to tend to their own being, day after day, beneath the notice of history's louder narratives, and in the hush of night. Their presence lingers still, a whisper of resilience, a breath of quiet defiance. A testament to the enduring power of tending gently to oneself in the shaded courtyards and behind the discreet curtains of private rooms. There were conversations that never reached the ears of scribes or historians. They were not recorded in temple inscriptions or etched into stone. These were quiet, necessary conversations whispered from woman to woman, shared in soft tones over bowls of honeyed dates or as fingers deftly wove strands of linen into new garments. They were about safety, about the fragile art of protecting one's body and spirit in a world that did not always offer such protections willingly. For the courtesans of ancient Egypt, knowledge was survival. Beneath the layers of perfumes and painted eyes, there existed a subtle web of shared wisdom, practical remedies, quiet warnings, and gentle advice passed down not through formal teachings, but through the intimacy of trust. These were lessons on how to navigate the unspoken risks of their profession, the delicate balance of offering pleasure while safeguarding their own well-gash being taught in the early morning hours. Before the city had fully woken, a group of women might gather in the cool shade of a reed canopy, their hands busy with small tasks, grinding malachite, braiding threads, or preparing herbal pastes. It was during these communal rituals that conversations unfolded, softly and without fanfare. An elder courtesan, her voice as smooth as the oil she applied to her wrists, might share a recipe for a cleansing tincture and infusion of honey, garlic, and lotus pollen said to ward off infections. The younger women listened closely, committing every detail to memory, for such knowledge was rarely found in scrolls or papyrus. The brothel itself, often viewed by outsiders as a place of leisure and excess, was also a hub of quiet medicinal practice. Small wooden shelves lined the walls of inner chambers, filled with clay jars and woven baskets containing dried herbs, mint for soothing fevers, frankincense for cleansing wounds, myrrh for easing inflammation. Courtesans became their own healers, relying on remedies passed down through generations of women who had learned to care for one another when no one else would. There were unspoken protocols too, subtle but vital. The way a woman might gently steer a client toward washing his hands in scented water before an encounter. The discreet application of protective ointments made from beeswax and resin, layered beneath the softness of perfumed oils. These were small acts of agency, woven seamlessly into the rituals of pleasure, ensuring that self-preservation remained an invisible but constant presence. The conversations extended beyond physical remedies. Emotional safety, too, required attention. Over shared meals or while resting by the riverbank, courtesans would exchange stories, accounts of clients who were respectful, and quiet warnings about those whose promises were as fragile as papyrus in a flood. These stories were shared not with bitterness, but with a pragmatic gentleness. As one might discuss the shifting currents of the Nile, knowledge of who to trust and when to retreat became an essential compass in navigating a profession where power dynamics could shift with a glance. Elder courtesans held a revered role in this web of care. Having weathered many seasons of the profession, their guidance was offered with the quiet authority of lived experience. They taught younger women how to read a patron's mood before words were exchanged, how to recognize when a charming facade masked unpredictable temperaments. They shared not just strategies for earning favor, but more crucially, methods for maintaining dignity and control in spaces where such things were easily eroded. Herbal knowledge, in particular, became a shared craft among these women. Recipes for contraceptive pastes made from acacia gum and crocodile dung, though spoken of with delicate humor, were treated with utmost seriousness. Remedies for soothing menstrual discomfort, tinctures for calming anxiety, these were as much a part of the courtesan's toolkit as their jewelry or instruments. The preparation of these mixtures was a communal act, carried out in the quiet spaces between business, with an almost ritualistic care. Even the act of scenting oneself took on a layer of protective intent. Certain oils were chosen not only for their allure, but for their antiseptic properties. The sharpness of cedarwood, the cleansing qualities of frankincense, these scents became veils of both beauty and defense. In a world where their bodies were often sites of transaction, these women cultivated practices that allowed them to reclaim agency. Layer by layer, there were also softer, less tangible forms of care. In the evenings, when the city's pulse slowed, women would gather in small groups, not for the purpose of work, but simply to sit together, to share space. Sometimes they would sing soft songs, melodies that wove through their quiet like a gentle balm. Other times, they would simply listen, offering one another the kind of presence that expected nothing, asked for nothing, but was in itself deeply healing. Such gatherings were moments of emotional fortification. They reminded each woman that beyond the titles, the painted smiles, and the intricate negotiations of daily life, they were seen, known, and valued by those who understood their world most intimately. This emotional kinship was perhaps their most powerful safeguard, a web of mutual care that allowed them to navigate the uncertainties of their profession with a quiet, enduring grace. Despite the practical strategies and herbal remedies, the unspoken risks never fully vanished. They lingered at the edges, as constant as the desert winds. But within the houses of pleasure, within the circles of courtesans resting beneath palm-shaded courtyards, there thrived a resilient wisdom, a determination to safeguard one another. In a world that so often forgot their humanity, it is in these whispered conversations, these shared rituals of care, that we find the truest testament to their strength. Not in grand acts of defiance, but in the quiet daily choices to protect, to nurture, and to educate one another. These women, whose names rarely found their way into history's scrolls, carried a lineage of knowledge that stretched far beyond their own lifetimes. A knowledge not of grand politics or temple decrees, but of the delicate, essential art of survival. And even now, if one closes their eyes and listens beyond the surface noise of history, there is a whisper that remains. It is the sound of women, seated in a circle beneath the stars, sharing remedies, sharing stories, and tending to one another with a care as soft and enduring as the Nile's eternal flow.